Walmart issues an announcement, a sounds alarm about how dangerous our economy seems. We're going to discuss why their stock went down tremendously over the last 2 days and what their earnings show. There was some positive news, but then they came around and said this is why we need to pay attention. Also, there's a story of the Ukrainian fields. You know, all the grain that they grow and how they help. They're considered the breadbasket of Europe. We're going to discuss why we actually see something that happened during this war time. Who came in and helped them get their fertilizers going back and their grain growing? This story will blow your mind. Is this the reason that you saw the biggest push when it comes to this war from Europe and big global players? This story will really blow your mind. We'll talk about it. Also, we'll discuss how good foods versus bad foods heal our bodies. And there's a Ugandan study that said that instead of all the trash, garbage food that people were sending over to us, we just started giving them eggs. And all of a sudden we realized they were growing way faster, being more healthy than they've ever been, especially when you compare them to the people who are eating garbage cereal with sugar on it. Boy, there's a lot of truth to that. Let's jump into these stories and a few more. This video starts right now. Hey guys, welcome to The Max. Thank you so very much for being here today. If you are new to The Max, please go down here, press subscribe, ring the bell, give us a thumbs up. It does mean the world to us. And we humbly ask that you do that. Also, get you entered into the giveaways each and every month. Now remember, we also have two other channels. My wife's channel, The Max Life. Check it out as a perspective of her, of how we try to live sustainable. And also we have another channel called The Life with Kobe Mack. It's kind of the behind the scenes of how we grow all this food. We're actually doing a video today on that channel. It will probably come out tomorrow. So please check it out so that way you can see exactly how we try to live sustainable and prep and live a life that is, of course, honoring Christ, but also allowing us to raise our family the best way we know how. Now let's jump into the stories of the day. First, let's talk about Walmart. They set an alarm just the last few days because their stock started plunging. Now, this was after a story that came out that said that they had started getting more market share because more well-to-do, more affluent, more higher society were having to shop at Walmart because of the economy. Now remember, the economy right now has nothing to do with Trump. This is really the Bidenomics flowing over. But it showed that they pick up a good bit of market share. However, why would it make their stock plunge then? Well, because of tariffs. It reported a 20% surge in e-commerce over the holiday quarter, meaning they started growing more to compete against Amazon. So that's where they started growing their market share and also growing more of incomes that were higher income earners. But it said, here's the problem and what we reached when it came to January. The speculation of the tariffs is now going to make us back up a little bit and kind of see what the next few months is going to look like. It says, Doug McMillan says, we have the momentum driving the lower prices, growing assortment, and e-commerce, and we gained a ton of market share. So we're looking healthier than we've ever looked. He said, however, given the current guidance, which includes the potential impact of tariffs, he said the big question is whether the retailer, like us, can assume the extra cost and not pass to the consumer. Now, here's where I want to stop just for a second. Now remember, this is all speculation. These tariffs are talk. But the goods that are being sold now have nothing to do with the goods that are going to be tariffed because it's two separate set of goods. Remember, those goods that you're buying in the store are here already. They don't just, they don't get airmailed and dropped over to our local Walmart in a day. So the speculation is actually what's driving up the price. Now, most people say this is where the Democrats can always come in and say, well, I mean, you see what the tariffs are doing. It's going to make your grocery prices higher. You're not going to be able to afford them. I mean, look, Walmart's going to have to go up, and they're the biggest provider of grocers and retail in America. Trump, you evil person. That's what they're going to say, okay? Now, is there a chance where tariffs could cost more and make things go up for a season? Yes. I mean, no one's denying that. The thing, though, is this. Do you think these tariffs will stay on long? Because remember this. While you think that you're going to pay more and it's only hurting us, when we put tariffs on someone, it's actually hurting them way worse than it's hurting us. Chinese markets and Chinese economy will be affected even more because of the tariffs, not America. Now, if you see the negotiations he's had with Canada, with Mexico, and with Europe, Europe just came out, and now they are being able to buy our natural gas, our supply of natural gas versus Russia. And they've bought it more than they have ever. We're exporting more to Europe than we ever have, especially over the last administration. So what you're seeing is those hardball and hardline situations that Trump is putting us in is actually benefiting us so far. I mean, it's literally to a point where we've won with Mexico, won with Canada, and now we're winning with different parts of Latin America, but also with Europe. Now, China, that's the big player. Are we going to win with China? Now here's what you got to think of. You know how you go running. You know, I've been running a lot lately. And you know how you run and really you're miserable when you run. You can't hardly breathe. Your legs are hurting. I get shin splints and I'm thinking, my gosh, it's almost over. But then when it's over, I feel better. I feel like I'm losing weight. I feel like I'm in better health. I feel like I'm actually in the best health of my life. But it took me making sacrifices. It took me getting up earlier. It took me running those miles each and every day. Well, that's what the American economy has got to do. America is actually struggling tremendously. The pressure of inflation and the pressure of the markets may not be affecting the stock market, but it is affecting you in Main Street. Think about it. Think about how much of you live paycheck to paycheck. Think of how much of us are having debts. Think of how much it takes to go to the store. For instance, me and Misty talked about this. We go to Costco once a month and go to another grocer here and there once a month. And when we go there, it's like, we grow our own food and it's still more pricey than it's ever been. Now, that wasn't because of Trump and the tariffs. It's because of the situation and predicament that our leadership has put us in over the last 40 or 50 years. And we'll talk about that in just a second, dealing with gold and some other money options. So we can blame this on tariffs, but actually what we're doing is we're in the run. We're doing the sprint right now. We're going to feel better after it's over, but we may have to go through some terms of endearment and some harder times just for a season until the negotiations come through. Because what we see is the trade deficit. What we see is the problems with the fact that we keep putting on piles and piles and piles of debt. All that can be solved by going through maybe some harder times. Maybe the run on the treadmill. Maybe the extra early mornings that we have to get up. Why do we do it? Because we see the benefit after all. We see the weight loss. We see the fact that we're getting better health for our family. We see the endurance that we're getting. We're seeing the fact that we've broke a challenge for the day. Well, that's what Trump is doing. While Trump is cutting the budget, and this is something we need to do, while Trump is firing a lot of people, while we're trying to save a lot of money, and it seems like that's working. I want you to listen to this. Republican Senate Rand Paul asked the question on the Senate floor, if Elon and Doge are finding so much waste and fraud and they're wanting to reduce the deficit, and they're doing that, why are the Senate Republicans passing a budget today that increases spending $340 billion? So when we talk about the tariffs and the speculation of it and the dangers of it, and we talk about how many people are losing jobs under Trump, what he's trying to do is go through the run and make things better. But these are the kind of policies that's put us in the predicament we're in. Walmart stock and the fact that Walmart may have to raise prices, they may try to blame all this on Trump. I thought this was a good comment that Douglas McGregor said. He said, we're heading for stormy waters when it comes to financials. That's going to be very tough for this president because American frequently blames the one who is in charge at that time of power. He says, for everything, they get blamed. Now listen to this. I love this. He said, but most of all this is going on, it's not going to be his fault. It's going to be his predecessors. Now, this is not just Biden's fault. Biden caused a lot of problems, don't get me wrong. But it's 30 and 40 and 50 years of bad economic policies. I mean, did you hear what Rand Paul just said? He said, we are wanting to cut the budget. And don't get me wrong, the Congress, Mike Johnson, even though I'm not the biggest Mike Johnson fan, they're trying to find ways to cut. So their bill actually is way better than the Senate bill. But the Senate bill has $40-something billion allocated, Republicans allocated for Ukraine. It has $340 billion of extra spending, that money we don't have. So as Trump is trying to cut this, and Doge just cut 140-something billion so far, I think it's what it said, estimated, your Senate and Congress are spending 340. So is it really Trump's fault or the tariffs' fault that your prices may still go up, or the fact that we may go through some tough times? No, I think what he's trying to do is right the ship. but we better get better Congress and Senate in there if we really want to right the ship. Now, Walmart said they're going to try to keep the prices down, and I hope they do. But ultimately, I don't think we need to blame this on tariffs. I think we need to blame this on our leadership, or lack thereof. I love the fact of what Trump and Elon are doing. I actually do like the fact that they're talking about the dividends. Now, again, not that I'm saying we should all get $5,000. That's not what I'm saying. I love the fact that they have found ways to save money, to not print extra money, and to find ways to reallocate money. Now, that being said, we need to get the Congress and Senate to do the same thing. Now let's go on to another story about money, because this is what really ties all back in. There was a gentleman that was being interviewed, and he said the sad thing is we're seeing the fact of money changing. He said, and this is where you're seeing the talks of reset. He said, the penny, how they're taking the penny out. He said the nickel's next. He said because it takes even more to make the nickel. He said, so through this restructuring and through us cleaning up our budgets, he said what we're actually seeing is a chance where we're moving away from certain parts of our monetary system. He said, however, here is the positive notes. He said, listen to what Trump is saying. This is Doug Casey speaking, and he's, again, an economist kind of based on gold thought. He said, why do they keep talking about auditing gold? He said, why do they still want to keep knowing what the gold is on their balance sheet? He said, why are they not evaluating it high like they should? He said, what I believe they're going to do is once they find that we do have the gold, or once we see how much gold we actually have in the audit, he said, you could see a play to where they're going to start taking the dollar and taking the world currencies and renegotiating the fact that it could be put back on the gold standard. He said, now, that means gold wouldn't be $3,000 or $4,000 an ounce. He said probably be $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 an ounce. He said, now that may not happen. He said, but the fact that they're auditing the gold and the fact they're talking more about precious metals and rare earth metals, and he said, look, for instance, look at the gold stocks and gold mine. He said, look across America. Look how many people are getting back into gold stocks and gold mining. He said, now typically that means people are fearing of what the dollar is doing. That is true. But you do have a president who may come around and say, instead of fearing that gold is going up, or instead of fearing the dollar is dying, why can't we find a way to put the gold back tied to the dollar? And then we find our dollar more stable than it's ever been. We actually find gold worth more than it's ever been. So I'm anxious to see what's happening with this economy. I think that the reset that we're seeing, I think it could be bad for a while. I think it's the run, like we talked about. Running on the treadmill, shin splints are hurting, but ultimately, because of the bad policies we've done, pulling off the gold standard, confiscating gold back in even the 30s, and getting away from true sound money has caused all this. And I think even though Elon and Trump are not perfect, I do think that they're doing a good thing when they're trying to right the ship when it comes to economics. But as I stated with the Walmart story, our problem is not probably with the executive branch, it's the legislative branch. And until we get some of these people out of Washington, I don't know if we can solve it. Just like David Freeberg, I heard him say on a podcast the other day, he said, when I went to Washington for the inauguration, he said, I was more encouraged than I've ever been to see Elon doing what he's doing, to see Trump, to see RFK, to see Tulsi, to see all this populist movement to make America great and cut the deficit. He said, but I was just as disgusted once I started meeting with Senate and congressmen because I see that they are chomping at the bits to spend Americans' money. He said, because that's how they stay in power, is to keep spending Americans' money. So the Walmart story, the gold-back story, the fact of the tariffs, all these have one thing in common. Bad monetary policy, not really by Trump, but by the legislative branch. And that's the one we better figure out on term limits. That's the one we better figure out quit lobbying. That's the one where I'd love to see executive orders come to Trump and say, you know what? We're not going to allow any special interest to get back into our bills. No pork. If you start seeing those kind of pushes, now you may see some major blowback on Trump. But to be honest with you, that's the run that we need. That's the hard shin splints we need. That's the sweat that we need to be on the treadmill doing, is to get rid of some of that. And if we get rid of some of that, I actually think we can right the ship. Now, this is a story I want to bring up dealing with our food system. Now, there was a study that came out that said that in Uganda, and this was shared actually by Justin Rhodes. He shared this. I thought this was a good thought. He reposted it. It said, why did I grow up eating grain-filled, sugary-filled, baked junk cereal as part of what we consider a complete breakfast. That's all we ever heard. Commercials, again, with cereal saying that we needed all the nutrients and minerals that cereal gave us, which is unbelievable. There's a new study, and Mark Sison just shared this. He said there's a new study that is giving 2 eggs a day to poor Ugandan kids, increased their growth rate, and eliminated many nutrient deficiencies that most people still have, even in America, all because they were eating eggs. He said what they did is they realized in Uganda, instead of giving people starchy slop junk that most of the world's eating, they started just making it economic and started giving eggs to these kids. These kids started not getting sick anymore, not having nutrient deficiencies, and also started growing faster than the comparison across the world. And all it was they changed their diet. Now the war on eggs, the war on good wholesome food. I mean, what does that matter? Well, what it matters is, what did I tell you a few weeks ago? 15 companies owns all of American food and world food and serves us that garbage all the time instead of true goodness. Now, I want you to listen to this other story, and these two stories go hand in hand. Listen to this. Glenn Beck shared this. I thought this was good. It says, ever wonder why media was so... while the media in the Western world all said the same thing about Ukraine, and how 90% of all people who supported media and all your leaders in Congress pretty much backed Ukrainian outlets and Ukrainian propaganda dealing with this war effort and conflict? He said because USAID funded the training and the propaganda for this. Now remember, this is the same USAID that Trump just audited. I want you to listen to something else. Now that's dealing with journalism. How does that have to do with food? Listen to this story. How USAID assisted the corporate takeover of Ukrainian agriculture. This is a story from Zero Hedge. It says, a recent essay titled The Real Purpose of Net Zero by Jeffrey Jackson poised that Europe's current war against farmers in the name of preventing climate change is ultimately designed to inflict famine. Says Jackson is not speculation on global motives. He is warning humanity of rapidly unfolding realities and observations of the war on the cow, the chicken, and the egg. Listen to this. I thought this was huge. He said Europe's push for GMOs, the WEF and UN plant-based dependent derivatives of synthetic fertilizers and agrochemicals and GMOs that people like Bill Gates have pushed. He said, moreover, we have seen that the war-torn country of Ukraine couldn't grow crops this last few years. So who did they look to fulfill their obligations of growing food? They looked to USAID. USAID started funding them with things such as this. This was an article from last year. Listen to this. It says, Zelensky signs law legalizing production of GMO products in Ukraine. Something that's never happened. They've always had non-GMO, good quality crops growing. But during this war, for some reason, I mean, gosh, we got to get crops up. We got to feed the world. So USAID steps in, along with a global push with WEF and the UN, and starts allowing for GMOs to be processed. And guess who passes it? Remember, America funded the pensions, the congresses of their area, the lawmakers, and the government of Ukraine. What we realized is the money that flowed into them, it pretty much bought the legalization of GMO crops into these, what we call the breadbasket of Europe, Ukraine. The roots of the current globalist plan to save humanity through the climate is linked to what? In the 1970s and throughout all of history since 1970s, the Kissinger Report, which has called for control of the food supplies and agriculture as part of the globalist collaboration with nation states and NGOs to advance U.S. national security through the USAID. Kissinger's report, created by USAID, which also was created by the CIA and various federal agents, including even the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The playbook was more quietly implemented during the Ukrainian war, once again orchestrated by the USAID. Before the Russian invasion in February of 2022, Ukraine was the breadbasket of Europe, prohibiting GMO technologies and synthetic fertilizers. Within months of the U.S. intervention, USAID assisted in dismantling these protections and named for land reforms for Ukraine. opened the door for GMO crops, synthetic fertilizers, and the way America has grown crops. Now let's go back to the Uganda story. Eggs, not this GMO starchy cereal, is actually what made people healthy. Real food. The current push for dominant global food production, usually industrial systems, is the cornerstone of globalist dominion of all humanity. Think about that now. I want to read that again. It says the global production of food, the current push to dominate the global food through industrial systems, is the cornerstone of complete global dominion of humanity. Kissinger said, control the food, control the energy, control the world. That's exactly what you're seeing this do. So when Trump went after USAID, you better be glad of that, because actually what you saw with Trump and Musk going for USAID, it wasn't about just stopping them from giving money. It wasn't the fact that they were just stopping laundering from the Democrats. You're seeing programs where they were truly pushing global thought patterns through the CIA, through the Democrats, through the Kissinger report, to control the food and control humanity. Schwab and Gates are fully cognizant of this fundamental truth that Henry Kissinger said in 1974. USAID has aided all three, having lost almost all their small farms in the last century in Europe. America is well ahead of the Europeans in the near complete dependence of the industrial food. So now the war on the farmers is bigger than we've ever seen. We'll go to this last story and then we're going to wrap it up. Kennedy explains how Gates and China are buying up the U.S. farmland. The question is, how did we allow this to happen? How can we fix it? Smithfield, the country's largest pork producer, built slaughterhouses in North Carolina that could produce 30,000 pigs a day. Smithfield had an ally named Wendell Murphy, who was the state senate. He passed 28 laws in NC State Senate, making it illegal to sue factory farms. He left and went into the partnership with Smithfield and created to raise pigs in a warehouse called Murphy's 1100 instead of on farms. A senator opened the door for global push of companies coming in to grow food in manufactured hubs, not true farms. And he made laws in North Carolina passed against suing them for practices that were really illegal for animals and they should have been on farms. They dropped the price of pork from 60 cents to 2 cents. So we were happy. We didn't complain because we're like, oh, we're saving money. But we're breaking our food system because what we're doing is raising them wrong with the help of law. It's lawfare. They put out 28,000 independent hog farmers in that state and replaced it with 2,200 factories, all owned by Smithfield, which is a Chinese company. The only way independent hog farmers could survive is to put in the style farms that Murphy 1100 did. Started raising their animals different, not on farm, but in warehouses. The Smithfield food bought by China in 2013 accounted for $4.7 billion, owning 25 to 30% of the entire U.S. pork market. Pork has never been the same because now they have to treat them with more medicine, give them more trash food to keep them growing in the way that lawfare allowed them to not be sued and to shut down the farms of America when it comes to pork. This is happening with our chicken. This is happening with our cattle. Back to the Uganda study. Their kids are growing faster with less deficiencies, less medication, because they're on 2 eggs a day. So think if we had a whole-based diet, like in India, like in some of these other areas where they grow non-GMO crops and they try to be regenerative in their practices, and we realize if we start eating good quality food again, how healthy we would be. I had people literally saying, why would you dare raise hogs in a forest? Why would you not raise them with covered sheds and concrete? Because we've been told that that's how you raise animals. Instead, we raise animals the way it's supposed to be raised. They're going to grow slower. It's going to take a little bit more feed. It's going to take a little bit more time. It's going to be a harder work because there's times that we're going to lose some animals. It's going to be a practice of these animals have to build a stronger bloodline. That's what we have to have. And when we get back to good food practices, we're going to realize how messed up we truly are. Because what we've done, just like Europe, just like now what you see in Ukraine, we've allowed big business and big players to do what Kissinger said. Control the food, control humanity. This goes back to the Walmart story. We're making Walmart bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's not a bad thing to have a grocer that can give you good prices. But if all they're feeding you is garbage food and you just want it because it's cheap, then what we're doing is we're the one that's going to be deficient. We're the one that's going to be hooked on medicine. And those Ugandans eating those eggs, they're realizing the truth of good, healthy food. Guys, let me know your thoughts on these stories. There's a lot going on, and I want to hear what you have to say. Comment below on the food. Comment below on Walmart. Comment below on gold. What do you think about trying to be gold-backed standard again when it comes to our money? Because what we're seeing is our economy, like Douglas McGregor said, is falling fast. And when Trump is trying to cut, even the Senate Republicans, along with the Democrats, are trying to pass more spending bills. Unbelievable. Guys, thank you for watching. God bless.
Be free, be free.